the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape.
Welcome to Real Talk Horror Edition, the podcast where we explore the chilling corners of horror cinema, unraveling the layers of fear that these films sometimes expertly weave. I'm your host Josh, and whether you're a die-hard fan of psychological horror or someone who just loves a good scare, you've come to the right place. Over the last few episodes, we've been deep diving into phase 1 of our series on mind games and madness. These are films that mess with your mind, blur the lines between reality and imagination, and take you on a harrowing journey into the depths of human psychology. These are the stories that linger long after the credits roll, forcing us to sit with their questions and maybe even revisit them to catch what we've missed. Tonight, we've reached the finale of Phase 1, and I think I couldn't have picked a more fitting film to close out this chapter than Session 9. This is a movie that encapsulates everything we've discussed so far: mental instability, unreliable narratives, and the kind of dread that creeps up on you like a shadow in the dark. Directed by Brad Anderson, who would later gain acclaim for the amazing film The Machinist, Session 9 is co-written by Anderson and actor Stephen Geveden, who also stars in the film. It's a haunting tale of an asbestos removal crew working in a crumbling mental hospital, a real-life location, the infamous Danvers State Hospital. The film seamlessly blends psychological and environmental horror, using its chilling setting to amplify the sense of unease. What makes Session 9 such a standout in psychological horror is its restraint. This isn't a movie that will rely on jump scares or elaborate special effects. Instead, it thrives on atmosphere, character tension, and a story that leaves you questioning the truth at every turn. This is a hidden gem that did not make waves during its initial release, but has since gained quite the loyal cult following, and for very good reason. So turn down the lights and let's venture into the decaying halls and peeling walls of Danvers State Hospital. Together, we'll unpack what makes Session 9 not just a terrifying watch, but an unforgettable exploration of the human psyche. So let's just dive right into the 7th and final film of Phase 1 of our exploration into psychological horror with 2001's Session 9. If you haven't seen it, well, what are you doing? Pause this right now and go watch it. And then come back, because this is a slow burn masterpiece that takes its time crawling under your skin and staying there. This film is brought to us by Brad Anderson, a director who's become known for his ability to craft deeply unsettling atmosphere. You may recognize his name from 2004's The Machinist, another psychological thriller that leaves you questioning reality. But with Session 9, Anderson laid the groundwork for his talent in exploring fractured psyches and haunting environments. And as I mentioned, co-written by Anderson and Stephen Geveden, who plays the significant role in this film, the story is tightly woven with themes of guilt, fear, and repression. What elevates this film is its location. Danvers State Hospital, a real-life, long-abandoned mental institution in Massachusetts. This building is practically a character itself, with its decaying walls and labyrinthine halls amplifying the film's sense of unease. Filming at Danvers wasn't just a practical choice. It was essential to the film's authenticity. There's a weight to every scene set in that building, an almost oppressive atmosphere that no set designer could recreate. Its history as a mental hospital that housed thousands of patients, and its reputation for controversial treatment methods, brings an eerie realism to the film, and it helps that whole idea stick with you long after it's ended. The story centers on an asbestos abatement crew hired to clean up the hospital. What should have been a straightforward job quickly turns into a nightmare as tensions within the group escalate and the hospital's dark past begins to bleed into their present. The team stumbles upon a series of old audio recordings from a patient's therapy sessions, labeled Session 1 through Session 9. These recordings reveal disturbing details about the patient's mental state and the events leading up to her time at Danvers. As the tapes progress, the crew members begin to exhibit signs of paranoia and unravel under the building's oppressive influence. What's fascinating about Session 9 is how it balances the personal demons of the crew with the unsettling history of the hospital. Is the building truly haunted, or are the characters projecting their own inner turmoil? The film never gives a clear answer, and the ambiguity is one of its greatest strengths. Now, when I heard about Session 9, I was immediately intrigued by its premise. A psychological horror film set in a real abandoned hospital. That alone was enough to pique my curiosity. What struck me the most, however, was how effectively it uses its setting. Danvers State Hospital doesn't feel like a backdrop. It feels alive, sentient. Every shadowy hallway and peeling wall seems to echo with voices of the past. The hospital is both a literal and metaphorical representation of the characters' crumbling psyches. But what truly hooked me was the film's restraint. Session 9 doesn't rely on those jump scares and gore to get under my skin. Instead, it built its tension slowly, focusing on that psychological unraveling of the characters. The sound design is subtle but chilling, with the therapy session tapes providing a haunting, almost hypnotic backdrop to the unfolding events. The ambiguity of the film is another standout element. It leaves so much up to interpretation, which makes it endlessly rewatchable. Every time I revisit it, I find myself noticing new little details or rethinking my theories about what's really going on. Session 9 is a film that demands patience and attention, but the payoff is more than worth it. It's a perfect example of how psychological horror doesn't need flashy effects or elaborate monsters to terrify the audience. It just needs a strong story, some complex characters, and an atmosphere that refuses to let you go. So at its core, Session 9 is a psychological powder keg, with the fragile dynamics of the removal crew acting as the match. The film uses the interpersonal tension as its foundation, exploring how jealousy, distrust, and unresolved personal baggage can create a perfect storm of paranoia. This crew isn't just a group of workers. They're a microcosm of fractured psyches. Phil, for instance, harbors bitterness and deep-seated mistrust toward Hank, his cocky co-worker who's been dating Phil's ex-girlfriend. Hank, in turn, uses this dynamic to needle Phil, escalating their animosity. Meanwhile, Gordon, the crew's foreman, tries to keep the peace but is clearly battling demons of his own. This interplay of egos and unresolved emotions is crucial to the film's horror. The men's unraveling feels entirely plausible, rooted in the everyday pressures and conflicts that most of us can relate to. As these tensions boil over, the hospital itself seems to feed off their energy, amplifying their insecurities and fears. Is the building actively manipulating them, or are they simply projecting their inner turmoil on the decaying walls? One of the most compelling aspects of the film is how it blurs the line between what's real and what's imagined. From the very beginning, the film plays with our perception, planting those seeds of doubt about the reliability of what we're seeing. As the story progresses, the horrors feel increasingly ambiguous. Are the men being haunted by external forces tied to the hospital's dark past, or are they succumbing to the weight of their own psychological baggage? This ambiguity is deliberate, forcing viewers to question everything, from the characters' motives to the very nature of the events unfolding on screen. The therapy session tapes are a perfect example of this. The recordings recount a patient's dissociative identity disorder, with each session peeling back another layer of her fractured mind. But as we listen, it becomes harder to tell whether the tapes are revealing something about the hospital's history or serving as a mirror to the crew's unraveling psyches. This interplay between internal and external horrors is what makes this film so unnerving. Gordon, the crew's foreman, is the linchpin of the story, and his character arc is as compelling as it is tragic. When we first meet Gordon, he's calm, stoic, and quietly authoritative. But as the week progresses, cracks begin to show. We learn that Gordon is struggling with a strained marriage and a newborn baby at home, and the stress of his personal life begins to bleed into his work. What makes Gordon such a fascinating character is how subtly his dissent is portrayed. At first, his behavior seems entirely rational. He's under immense pressure, and who wouldn't be? But as his guilt and repression surface, his actions become increasingly erratic. By the time the truth is revealed, we realize that Gordon has been unraveling all along, and the clues were right there in front of us. The supporting characters also contribute to the psychological depth of the film. Phil's bitterness, Hank's arrogance, and Mike's intellectual curiosity each add layers to the story, creating a sense of unease that feels deeply personal. These aren't just archetypes. They're flawed, complex individuals, and their struggles make the film's descent into madness all the more believable. Finally, let's talk about the most effective elements of Session 9, and that's the use of the unseen. The film thrives on this, keeping its horrors just out of reach and leaving much to our imagination. The therapy tapes, particularly the titular Session 9, are a masterclass in suggestive horror. The recordings hint at unspeakable trauma and a sinister presence, but they never explicitly reveal what's at the heart of the patient's suffering. This restraint forces us to fill in the blanks, and our imaginations often conjure something far more terrifying than anything the film could show us. Even the hospital itself plays into this fear of the unknown. The dark, decaying halls are filled with echoes of the past, but nothing tangible ever appears. Is the building haunted? Or is it simply a vessel for the characters' psychological breakdowns? The film never gives us a definitive answer, and that ambiguity might be its greatest strength. By leaving so much up to interpretation, Session 9 taps into a primal fear, the fear of what we can't see, can't explain, and may never fully understand. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are the ones we carry within ourselves. The visual language of Session 9 is one of its most unsettling aspects. Brad Anderson and cinematographer Uta Brisewitz used the abandoned Danvers State Hospital to its fullest, turning the decaying walls and endless corridors into nightmarish landscapes. The film employs stark natural lighting, often relying on the harsh glow of the crew's work lamps or the dim gray light filtering through dusty windows. This creates a cold, unwelcoming environment that mirrors the isolation and tension within the characters. The color palette is muted and desaturated. It's dominated by grays, browns, and these sickly greens. This lack of vibrancy enhances the oppressive atmosphere, making the hospital feel lifeless, yet alive with an unseen menace. Anderson also uses long, lingering shots to build unease, forcing us to scan the frame for movement or details that may not even be there. The camera becomes an unblinking observer, amplifying the sense of dread and voyeurism. Perhaps most effective is how the hospital itself feels like a living, breathing entity. Its decayed grandeur suggests a once thriving institution, now consumed by neglect and darkness, reflecting the psychological decay of the characters. The building isn't just a setting, it's a manifestation of the fear, guilt, and madness that permeates every part of the story. If the visuals of Session 9 set the stage, it's the sound design that ensures you're never at ease. The film's minimalist approach to sound is perfect, proving that what you don't hear can be just as terrifying as what you do. Every sound in the hospital feels deliberate, from the echoing of footsteps down the corridor to the faint creak of distant doors. The audio recordings from the sessions are particularly chilling, with the patient's fragmented voice and the eerie static creating a sense of intrusion, as if we're listening to something we were never meant to hear. The absence of traditional jump scare cues in the score is another bold choice. Instead, the music, composed by Climax Golden Twins, is ambient and unnerving, blending seamlessly with the natural sounds of the environment. The score ebbs and flows like a ghostly presence, never overwhelming the scene, but always reminding you that something isn't right. A standout moment is the use of silence. In key scenes, the absence of sound becomes deafening, forcing us to focus on the smallest details, a character's shallow breathing, the distant hum of machinery, and letting our imaginations just run wild. The choice to film Session 9 on location at Danvers is genius. The hospital, now demolished mental institution in Massachusetts, brings an authenticity to the film that no constructed set could really replicate. Those maze-like halls, the peeling paint and rusted fixtures, they all create an environment that's claustrophobic but vast. The sense of disrepair and abandonment mirrors the unraveling psyches of our crew, making the hospital a physical representation of their mental states. More than that, Danvers has its own history of being a real-life asylum with a very dark past. The historical weight seeps into the film, adding an unspoken layer of dread. The hospital feels haunted, not by ghosts, but by echoes of those who lived and suffered within its walls. Anderson uses this space to full effect, creating moments of pure visual terror. A single shot of an empty corridor can feel more menacing than a dozen jump scares, simply because of the building's inherent menace. That vast emptiness of the hospital contrasts sharply with its oppressive presence, and it leaves us to wonder, is it truly empty? Or is something lurking that I just can't see? In Session 9, the atmosphere isn't just a backdrop, it's the very fabric of the film's horror. It seeps into every frame, every sound, and every character, ensuring that the tension is relentless and unforgettable. Alright, now let's take a look and do a little character study from the protagonist, the antagonist, and the supporting cast. At the heart of Session 9 lies Gordon Fleming. Gordon, played by Peter Mullen, is the foreman of the asbestos removal crew, whose quiet, composed exterior masks a psyche unraveling at the seams. From the very beginning, Gordon is presented as a man under immense pressure. He's balancing the weight of his struggling business, his newborn at home, and the need to complete the job quickly. But these external stresses seem manageable at first. It soon becomes clear that Gordon's inner turmoil runs far deeper. Gordon's mental state unravels in subtle, deliberate increments. His seemingly rational decisions begin to feel off. His vacant stares linger a bit too long, and his interactions with others carry a quiet menace. Is Gordon merely a victim of the hospital's oppressive atmosphere? Or is he battling demons that were always there, waiting for a trigger? The brilliance of Gordon's character arc is its ambiguity. He is both a sympathetic figure and a possible antagonist. His descent into madness is portrayed with chilling authenticity, making us question whether he's being consumed by those external forces, perhaps the hospital's sinister history, or is his mind itself the true villain? This duality adds layers to his character, and they make him one of the most compelling protagonists I've seen in psychological horror. Now, the film lacks a traditional antagonist, which is precisely what makes it so unsettling. The villain is elusive, a shifting entity that could be the hospital, the character's inner struggles, or maybe it's a combination of both. Danvers State Hospital feels alive, as if its walls are imbued with the suffering of those who once lived there. It acts as a silent, omnipresent force, amplifying the crew's anxieties and feeding their paranoia. However, the film leaves enough of the ambiguity to suggest that the true antagonist might not be the hospital at all, but the psychological baggage that each character brings into its halls. For instance, the chilling audio recordings from the sessions, they hint at a sinister force tied to the hospital's past. But the film never explicitly confirms this. Instead, it allows us to interpret whether this force is supernatural or a reflection of the characters' crumbling psyches. The ambiguity makes the antagonist in Session 9 more conceptual than tangible, a choice that heightens the psychological horror. The supporting cast in Session 9 is a microcosm of conflicting personalities, each contributing to the escalating tension in unique ways. Phil, played by David Caruso, has a passive aggressiveness and barely concealed resentment toward his coworker Hank, create an undercurrent of hostility. His sharp wit and biting remarks seem like harmless banter at first, but as the film progresses, they take on a more sinister tone, fueling the group's growing discord. Hank, played by Josh Lucas, is cocky and self-assured, often acting as the foil to Phil's bitterness. His arrogance and selfishness make him an easy target for both the audience's disdain and the group's tension. When Hank disappears midway through the film, his absence creates a vacuum of suspicion and paranoia. Then there's Mike, played by Stephen Gevedin. He's the group's intellectual. His fascination with the hospital's history leads him to uncover the audio tapes. His role is pivotal, as his obsession with the tapes introduces that additional layer of unease and ambiguity. Is Mike merely curious, or is he being drawn into the hospital's dark influence? And then there's Jeff, played by Brendan Sexton III, the youngest member of the crew. Jeff is naive and impressionable. His fear of the dark and constant need for reassurance add a touch of vulnerability to the group dynamic. As tensions rise, Jeff's innocence becomes another casualty of the psychological warfare unfolding. Each character's personality and personal baggage add to the escalating paranoia. Their interactions are fraught with unspoken grudges, simmering jealousy, and thinly veiled hostility. As the hospital seems to magnify their worst traits, the crew's cohesion crumbles, leaving them to be vulnerable to both external and internal threats. In the film, the characters are as much victims of their own minds as they are of the hospital's presence. Gordon's unraveling, the ambiguous antagonist, and the tense dynamics between the crew members create a character study that's deeply unsettling and profoundly human. This focus on the psychological over the supernatural is what elevates Session 9 from a typical horror film to the ultimate in psychological tension. Now, the film's visual landscape is drenched in metaphor. The crumbling walls, peeling paint, and shattered windows of the hospital reflect the psychological state of the characters. These broken and decaying elements aren't just part of the setting, they symbolize just how fragile the human mind is and the slow erosion of the crew's collective sanity. The labyrinth-like hallways of the hospital serve as a metaphor for the characters' internal struggles. Just as they navigate the building's confusing corridors, they also try to find their way through their own guilt, fear, and secrets. The flickering lights and shadows create an oppressive atmosphere, suggesting that the truth is always just out of reach, hidden in the dark corners of their mind. The broken mirrors and reflective surfaces scattered throughout the film offer another layer of metaphor. They distort reality, hinting at the characters' fractured self-perceptions. These visual cues subtly remind us that we're seeing may not be the full truth, echoing the film's central theme of perception versus reality. And then the sessions are recordings of a patient with dissociative identity disorder. Each session peels back another layer of her fragmented psyche. These recordings parallel Gordon's own descent into madness, drawing eerie connections between the past and the present. As we listen to these sessions, it becomes clear that they are more than just a narrative device. They're serving as a chilling mirror to Gordon's unraveling. The patient's repressed trauma and dissociated identities mirror Gordon's own repression and guilt. Just as the patient is divided into multiple personas, Gordon seems to be splitting under the weight of his actions. This psychological mirror adds an unsettling depth to the story, and it blurs the lines between the hospital's dark history and Gordon's own mental collapse. Session 9 is also a critique of society's neglect of mental health. The decayed state of Danvers State Hospital is not just a spooky backdrop. It's a testament to the abandonment of those who once lived there. The film subtly but powerfully comments on how asylums, which were originally intended to heal, often became places of suffering and neglect. The hospital's dark legacy reflects the broader stigmatization of mental illness. The story doesn't just explore the personal ramifications of guilt and trauma. It also critiques how society often fails to provide support for those grappling with psychological struggles. The abandonment of the hospital and the ghost of its patients really symbolize how society just moves on, leaving its most vulnerable behind. There's also this haunting universality to the film's themes. The characters all struggle with guilt, repression, and fear of the unknown, and that speaks to the human condition. In this way, Session 9 becomes not just a story about a haunted hospital, but a reflection of our collective fears and failings. The layers of symbolism and subtext are what elevate it from a simple horror story to a complex psychological exploration. The visual metaphors, psychological mirroring, and cultural critique all work together to create a film that will linger in your mind. It's a reminder that horror, at its best, is not just about what scares us, but what it reveals about ourselves. Session 9 is a wonderful example of slow burn horror. As we mentioned, the film doesn't rely on jump scares or overt shocks to grip the audience. Instead, it builds tension methodically, drawing us into its unsettling atmosphere one scene at a time. From the moment the crew steps into the decrepit halls of the hospital, the movie establishes a feeling of dread that gradually intensifies with each passing moment. What makes this slow burn approach so effective is how it mirrors the unraveling of our characters' psyches. The pace gives the story room to breathe, allowing us to observe the subtle shifts in their behavior. These moments of quiet unease are punctuated by creeping revelations, like the mysterious recordings and the eerie discoveries within the hospital. By the time it reaches its climax, the tension has become almost unbearable, making the final act feel both inevitable but still very shocking. The twists in Session 9 aren't the kind that make you jump out of your seat. They're the kind that slowly sink in, and they make us question everything we've just watched. The film thrives on this ambiguity, and its narrative unfolds like a puzzle, where some pieces are deliberately left missing. As the characters' secrets and flaws come to light, the line between external horror and internal torment becomes increasingly blurred. Again, we wonder, is the hospital itself exerting some malevolent influence? Or are these characters simply succumbing to their own psychological demons? These subtle shifts in perception create a very disorienting experience for us, as every new revelation forces us to reevaluate what's real and what did we just imagine. One of the most impactful twists lies in the discovery of Gordon's actions. Without spoiling the details, the way the film reveals his role in the story is both devastating and deeply unsettling. It's a twist that doesn't rely on spectacle, but on the weight of its implications, leaving a lasting impression. And the ending of the film is as haunting as it is ambiguous. It doesn't tie up any loose ends or provide clear explanations. Instead, it leaves us lingering with questions and this really profound sense of just unease. This lack of resolution is a hallmark of psychological horror, as it forces us to confront the unknown and grapple with our own interpretations. The film's final moments are devastating, not because of what they show, but because of what they imply. Gordon's descent into madness reaches its tragic conclusion, and the fate of the other characters underscores the film's bleak tone. Yet, even as the credits roll, the true nature of the horror remains open to interpretation. Was it the hospital's lingering malevolence, or was it simply the characters' own human frailty that led to their downfall? By refusing to provide easy answers, Session 9 cements itself as a deeply unsettling experience. It's a film that lingers in your mind and encourages you to revisit its clues and unpack its layers long after the screen fades to black. This open-ended approach not only enhances its psychological impact, but also solidifies its place as a true standout in the slow burn psychological horror subgenre. In its pacing, twists, and ending, Session 9 exemplifies what makes psychological horror so compelling. It's not about immediate scares or shock value. It's about creating an experience that burrows into your mind and refuses to let go. This careful construction of tension and the ambiguity is what makes the film so memorable, and I think why it continues to resonate with fans of this particular genre. Let's look at the impact and legacy. Session 9 was not a blockbuster upon its release, but its influence has been undeniable. The film's minimalist approach, eschewing gore and overt scares for atmosphere and emotional depth, has paved the way for many modern horror films that prioritize psychological tension over traditional horror tropes. Directors like Mike Flanagan, The Haunting of Hill House and Hush, and Ari Aster like Hereditary, Midsummer, both owe a debt to Session 9's subtle yet impactful storytelling. Its ability to unsettle through implication rather than spectacle has become a defining trait of elevated horror. The use of a single haunting location to amplify psychological themes has also become a hallmark of the genre, inspiring films like The Babadook and The Lighthouse, where settings play an integral role in the narrative. The film also contributed to a growing appreciation for the slow burn horror, demonstrating that a story doesn't need jump scares or relentless pacing to captivate its audience. Its deliberate build-up and restrained execution have shown filmmakers the value of taking time to develop tension and atmosphere, leading to a resurgence in similarly paced psychological horror in the years since. When Session 9 debuted in 2001, it received a mixed response. Critics praised its atmosphere and setting, but felt it lacked the conventional thrills of mainstream horror. Audiences, too, were divided. Some found the ambiguity and deliberate pace off-putting, while others were drawn to its subtle, cerebral approach. Over time, however, the film's reputation has grown. Horror fans have come to appreciate its nuanced storytelling and chilling atmosphere, and it's often cited as a hidden gem within the genre. Online, podcast, film retrospectives all say Session 9 is frequently appearing on their lists of underrated horror films. Fans championing its unique qualities and defending its importance in the evolution of psychological horror. Today, Session 9 enjoys a dedicated cult following, particularly among fans who value slow burn horror and films that leave much to the imagination. The ambiguous narrative invites repeated viewings, and as we attempt to piece together its mysteries and uncover hidden layers of meaning, those repeated viewings feel necessary but still fun. This cult status is bolstered by its authentic setting, the hospital, which has become iconic in its own right. For many fans, the hospital is inseparable from the film's identity. Those decaying walls and the ominous corridors serve as perfect metaphors for the characters' unraveling minds. The location has inspired a fascination with abandoned asylums and the real-life stories behind them, further cementing Session 9's place in horror history. But I think what makes Session 9 endure is its ability to strike a balance between the deeply personal and the universal. The psychological struggles of the characters are all deeply human, reflecting themes of guilt, repression, and the fragile state of the human mind. Yet the film also taps into broader fears, the unknown, the unseen, and the lasting scars of societal neglect. For fans of psychological horror, Session 9 is a perfect example of restraint and atmosphere. And it proves that sometimes what you don't see is far more terrifying than what you do. Its legacy continues to grow as new generations of horror enthusiasts discover its haunting brilliance, and filmmakers draw inspiration from its minimalist yet profoundly unsettling approach. Though it may not have received widespread acclaim upon its release, Session 9 has carved out a unique place in horror history. Its influence on the genre, enduring cult status, and ability to captivate us with its subtle, ambiguous storytelling ensure that it will remain a touchstone for fans of psychological horror for many years to come. So let's get into my final thoughts and rating. Session 9 stands as a wonderful example of atmosphere and psychological tension. It's a film that lingers, and it doesn't rely on cheap scares or over-the-top theatrics. Instead, it seeps under your skin, using mood, character dynamics, and its chilling setting to craft a truly unforgettable experience. This is a film that trusts us to engage with its subtlety and rewards patience and close attention with a deeply unsettling journey into just how fragile the human mind can be. What also makes Session 9 so remarkable is how it balances the ambiguity and unease. Every frame, every whispered word, and every lingering shot feels intentional, and it pulls us deeper into its labyrinth of psychological horror. Whether you interpret its events as supernatural, psychological, or some combination of both, the film leaves room for reflection and discussion, a hallmark of truly impactful cinema. The film's strengths are undeniable. The setting is a character unto itself, exuding that eerie presence that feels sentient. Its maze-like halls, peeling walls, and haunting emptiness serve as a perfect backdrop for the crew's unraveling minds. The sound design is another standout element, using subtle audio cues like whispers, distant echoes, and the chilling sessions to heighten the sense of dread without overwhelming the viewer. The psychological depth of the characters, particularly Gordon, elevates the film from a straightforward horror story to a poignant exploration of guilt, repression, and mental fragility. Each crew member brings their own flaws and tensions, adding layers to the unfolding paranoia. However, Session 9's ambiguity might be a weakness for some viewers. Its refusal to provide clear answers, whether the horrors are supernatural or psychological, can leave those craving a more definitive resolution feeling frustrated. For others, though, it's this ambiguity that's part of its brilliance. It allows the film to linger in the mind and spark ongoing interpretation. For me, Session 9 earns a solid 8 out of 10. It's not a film for everyone. Its slow pace and subtle storytelling may alienate those seeking more conventional scares. But for fans of psychological horror, it's a near-perfect example of how to unsettle without relying on gore or shock value. To be honest, the only reason it doesn't rate higher is I personally just have a hard time with David Caruso. Maybe it's just me. Let me know if I'm wrong. If you're a fan of films like The Shining, The Others, or even more recent psychological horror entries like The Babadook or Hereditary, I think you'll find a lot to appreciate here. This is a film tailor-made for those of you who value atmosphere, character-driven tension, and subtle, thought-provoking storytelling. This isn't a film to watch casually. It's one to experience, preferably in a dark room with minimal distractions. It's perfect for horror enthusiasts who relish the opportunity to engage with a narrative on a deeper level, unpacking its layers and contemplating its meaning long after the screen fades to black. Session 9 is a haunting reminder of how powerful psychological horror can be when it's done right. It's a journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche, one that leaves its mark on anyone willing to take the ride. Whether you're discovering it for the first time or revisiting it after years, it's a film that demands and rewards your full attention. Thank you so much for joining me again today and listening to Real Talk Horror Edition. I hope you enjoyed this dive into Session 9 and its unique blend of psychological horror. It's always a pleasure to explore these hidden gems with you, and I'm excited to continue our journey through the darker corners of the genre. Before you go, I'd love for you to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, so you don't miss a single episode. And if you've enjoyed today's discussion, please take a moment to leave a review. It really helps the show reach more horror fans like you. Also, let's connect on social media. You can follow us on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk, where I'll be posting updates, behind-the-scenes content, and engaging with all of you about your thoughts on the films we discuss. I always love hearing from listeners, so feel free to share your thoughts, feedback, or even suggestions for future episodes. Now, looking ahead to our next episode, we begin Phase 2. Paranoia and the Unknown. These are films centered on paranoia, supernatural ambiguity, and themes of isolation, distrust, and manipulation. First up, we'll kick things off with a true classic, 1968's Rosemary's Baby, a film that shaped the genre and still stands as one of the most chilling depictions of psychological and supernatural horror. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thank you again for being part of Real Talk Horror Edition. I can't wait to continue this journey with all of you. Until next time, keep the lights low and the dread high. See you in the next episode.
Through the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape. Shadows play a twisted game. Fear and terror stake their claim. Footsteps follow close behind. Haunting thoughts invade your mind. Run away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams, they'll always stay. Windows rattle, doors they creak. Ghostly whispers start to speak. Every corner hides a fear. Close your eyes, they're drawing near. Candles flicker, spirits call. In the night they'll take it all. Midnight strikes, the clocks rewind. Nightmares now are intertwined. Run away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams, they'll all